Hi, I'm Marcel, and welcome to me screaming into the mostly about books. A while back, I started a project that I called a newbie romance project, where I wanted to try to understand and read more romance books more systematically, because I've read quite a lot of romance books. I didn't really like them. And I think that if you do not like something, you do actually have to have a reason for not liking it, in the sense that you need to understand why you do not like something, in the same way that you should try to understand why you do like something, especially when it comes to something so broad and large in our society as the romance genre. So I created this project, and I am now done with this. I've created several videos talking a little bit about my journey, and this is my wrap-up for this project. And I'm now going to go through my thinking, what I've learned, and I would love to hear your thoughts about it, any of it, down in the comments. So let's talk about romance. I'm going to read romance books. What am I going to read? And I realized that just because all of the romance books I have read up until that point weren't to my liking, didn't necessarily mean that all romance books weren't to my liking. At least that was my thinking. So I wanted to see if there were certain subsets of romance that I might enjoy. And I have a presentation for all of this in my first video that goes much more into detail. But here you can see the spreadsheet that I created, where I identified 32 subgenres of romance and trying to find a good representation for that subgenre. And the reason why I wanted to find a good representation is that it's easy to talk negatively about a genre if you only read bad examples. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to read in good faith. So I wanted to read what was considered good examples. So I identified 32 different subgenres, and some are modern, some are quite older. And then I searched through my own TBR. What did I own of romance books? And figured out that I had 8, and then we were up to 40 books in total. So to also then have what I called my wildcards, and to get up to an even 50, because I think 50 is a good way. You can get some indications of it based on 50, I think, I hope. And I created the wildcards and picked 10 wildcards. Or I didn't pick 10 wildcards. What I did was create a wheel that randomly picked my books for me, and I just went through and plotted in, I think it was over 300 different titles from different lists of best of romance books. So that's how we ended up with these 50 books that are sort of the books I have read for this project. And to create some sort of systematic thinking for it, I sort of read a synopsis, or wrote a synopsis of each book to sort of figure out what's happening. And a bit of a side, I'm sort of sad that I started the project with The Hating Game by Sally Thorne, because I was so upset by that book, because I kept ranting to my husband. Nobody hates their colleagues, right? No one spends the very finite energy that we have and the finite time that we have by hating our colleagues. I mean, this doesn't make any sense. And then he had to sit down and explain to me that no, people do actually spend time and energy hating their colleagues, also when it's not part of a romance plot. Hi. Just jumping in because during the editing process, my dad is doing the editing, so everyone say hi to my dad in the comments. I realized that I didn't explain sort of the close reading I did as much as I would want to, so I'm just going to go hopefully a bit more in depth with that. When I say that I did a close reading, what I mean is that I was trying to figure out what is the story of the book, not the plot of the book, but what is the book about? And I found certain characteristics of the book. The first one is that the main character is a blank slate. Now, they're not empty characters by all means, but they are very clearly someone that the reader is supposed to identify with and see themselves as. And the second one that I realized quite quickly is that the book very much is about having a realistic problem at the start of the book that then is solved during the book. So, for example, in The Hating Game, the problem that the book touches on is, of course, being stagnated in your career and sort of, is this really what I want to do? How do I sort of get the career and the jobs that I really want to do? Which is probably a very realistic problem for a lot of people in their late 20s, early 30s. And the third thing that I realized quite quickly is that the problem is going to be solved due to the main character's qualities, not actions. And what I mean with that is that the main character has certain important qualities like wit or charm, or is not as easily swept off her feet as other girls are when meeting the main character or other main character. And the fact that she isn't swept off her feet as easily is one of the reasons why the male character is drawn to her. So it's her qualities that he is drawn to. And the fact that he is drawn to her then fixes her problem. And I was wondering, well, what does this mean? And then I started to think about superhero films. So in a superhero film, it is actually functions quite similar to a romance book in the sense that you have the superheroes that are characters that the viewer is supposed to see themselves as. They have a problem that needs to be solved during the film, and it's the qualities of the superheroes, i.e. their superpowers, that is solving everything. So what does this tell us? Well, Freud has a theory when it comes to wish fulfillment that he sort of talks about regarding interpretation of dreams and daydreaming and everything like that. So Freud very famously talks about the id, the ego, and the superego. So the id is your baser desires. It's what we sort of are born with and our natural instincts, in a sense, while the superego is the rules and regulations of the society. And of course, because Freud is Freud and psychoanalysis and everything like that, the idea is then that you, the superego will then push down sort of our baser desires and suppress them. And that then they also get the subconscious and all of that. But what Freud then points out is that we use then daydreaming and wish fulfillment, and in some cases also dreaming, as a way of creating a space where these sort of suppressed wishes can exist and sort of been brought back up again. So if we are saying that what romance is, the idea that they are someone that I as a reader can see in myself, that there is a problem, that it's the qualities that are important here, what is then the id versus superego conflict that these books are trying to create a space for merging together? And what I think is going on in, for example, The Hating Game, is that I am enough to fix my problems. That the qualities that I have is enough for me to solve the things that I need to solve. Because society is telling me that I am not enough. So that's why I ended up with the code Fixing My Humdrum Life. It's because I think that these books are touching on creating a space where I can bring out the idea and live comfortable in the idea that I am enough to fix my humdrum life, because the qualities I have is enough for this to be solved. So that's what I mean with the code Fixing My Humdrum Life. And moving on to the regular show. And that's fine. Honestly, that is absolutely fine to have entertainment where that is the purpose, where the purpose is to create space where our needs and expectations of society can coexist without anything bad happening. And it's actually much more common. I'm hopefully going to remember to talk more about that later in the video. Actually much more common in our entertainment to have that as a function. So that's what I read from The Hating Game. And so I went on to When Dimple Met Rishi by Sandhya Menon. This is a young adult and is about an Indian American girl who is struggling with her parents' desires for her to get married and her own desires to get a higher education within the STEM. And in the book, they just magical merge. So I could see a trend happening that maybe, which is scary when you're trying to do a project like this. It's very important that, I'm understanding a trend coming up, because then you can end up having something that we call confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is that you end up only picking out the things that are only confirming what you already think. So it's very easy, especially sort of when 3 books, The Witch of Willow, Hall of Samantha Fox, All three sort of fit into this ego versus id. I have a problem in my humdrum life, and my romantic partner will come in and fix everything. But then I got to book number 4. It Happened One Summer by Tessie Bailey. And I'm glad I got to read that so early on in the project, because this didn't fit into the model. It Happened One Summer is very much more a Hallmark video or book based on the Hallmark films. And one of the issues that I very quickly had was that in the 3 other books, the main character that is a stand-in for, because they're plain, they're average, they're really nothing special. That's the point. They're supposed to be able to be a stand-in. When it Happened One Summer, the main character isn't plain or average at all. She is described obviously as a supermodel, very sort of capable. She isn't really meant to be a stand-in at all in that sense. At least I thought that first. So I was struggling with that. What is this? I recognize it as Hallmark because it's about a wealthy woman who travels to a small town to ensure her inheritance and then falls in love with a handsome sailor. So I recognize it very much. Yeah, that's Hallmark. It Happened One Summer, she is an heiress instead of a businesswoman, but the plot is pretty much the same. So I had to figure out, well, what is then actually going on here? And therefore, I did something that when we're doing analytical work, we have to do something that we are talking about regarding codes. So codes are names of groupings that we have for these books. So here you can say on the top row, I have romance as a category. So and then I have some subcategories that I'm going to talk about later. And then I have the code love story. So on my journey, I realized that not all books with necessarily happy ending and talking about a romantic couple in the center are actually romances. Because, for example, in a book like The Hotel on the Corner of a Bittersweet, this isn't meant to be a stand-in for anyone. These are 2 characters are a person who's Asian, Chinese American and Japanese American, who meet and fall in love at the beginning of the Second World War in the US. And about how the Japanese American girl is then, of course, sent to an internment camp in the US, and how the Chinese American deals with the rise of racism in his own family, his love for this Japanese American girl. How does he deal with living in a country where someone can just be sent into a internment camp? So there is sort of no stand-in, there is no wish fulfillment. So this is very different from all of the other stories. So that's why I sort of make different from those as codes. But I didn't really know where I should put It Happened One Summer, because it didn't fit into that category. And I was playing along with, well, what could this actually be? So I put it in unsure and wrote a description of it. And then I continued reading at Texas Rain by Jodie Thomas, Humdrum Life. A Princess in Theory by Alyssa Cole, Humdrum Life, more fairy tale-esque, but Humdrum Life, Wish Fulfillment. Tuesday Ladies by Monica Pitts wasn't a romance, had just a huge romance plot. And then I read Outlander by Diana Gabaldon, and it read very much like It Happened One Summer. It very clearly is a wish fulfillment in the sense that the main character is supposed to be someone I, as the reader, is supposed to read myself into. But it's not necessarily plain Jane as with a lot of the other ones. So Outlander is about a nurse from the Second World War that, due to magical circumstances, is put back in time and falls in love with a sexy Highlander. So I tried to think, okay, so we have very clearly one set of a code. Is there something similar between It Happened One Summer with Tess Daly and Outlander by Diana Gabaldon? Are they both wish fulfillment? Was my first question, because that's what was so clearly. So is there something about my inner desires and societal expectations? Well, yes. But the main issue here is that in It Happened One Summer and in Outlander, it's not necessarily that I have a problem that needs to be fixed. It's more the let's go on an adventure. Let's go experience something exciting and be kind of a bit of a tourist in a different culture than the one I am used to. In It Happened One Summer, it's very clearly about the working class, seaside fisherman culture. And in Outlander, it's very clearly Highlander. So then I sort of, it fit into place that this is actually also a form of wish fulfillment. But because it's not about fixing my own humdrum life, you don't really need that very close sort of blank slate character that you find in some of the other ones. So you can sort of, I am wishing that I am an heiress and traveling around to experience this, that. I am wishing that I am a very capable nurse. So can figure out everything when I go back to Highlander time and fall in love. So that's when I've sort of figured out the second code that I talked about. So one code was romance, someone fixes my humdrum life. And the second one is experience something exciting. And these books, they don't really have a problem at the beginning, when it's more about experiencing something exciting and being a tourist in a different culture. And these are very similar to, for example, male-oriented, what we would in the 1800s call a romance. So reading a bit more about romance today, romance is very strictly defined with being about a romantic couple and having a happy ending. So I already realized that, well, that doesn't really fit, because this is about a romantic couple. I would say it actually has a happy ending. Some would disagree that it's not necessarily a happy ending. And I mean it as a genuine happy ending, not necessarily a poignant happy ending, but a genuine happy ending. But there's still something about this that is different from a lot of the romance books that I've been talking about and that I've read in the project. Which is why I wanted to then sort of say, okay, no, romance books is something more than just about a romantic couple. And when I started reading it, yes, it's a form of wish fulfillment story. But reading about romance historically, going back to, for example, the 1800s, you realize that the way you talked about romance actually fits more to the wish fulfillment codes and categories that I've now presented than the more narrow definition of a romantic couple with a happy ending. Because going back, romance were books that were wish fulfillment stories. Robinson Crusoe would be a romance story. And now I'm completely blank about all the other romance stories. But James Bond books and films would be romance stories and fits within these sort of wish fulfillment categories. I have a desire to experience something exciting, something that isn't a part of my everyday life. So I merge it by creating stories where I can imagine myself in a different role than the one I have today. And James Bond, Gulliver's Travels was one of the ones I was thinking about. And Robinson Crusoe, all of those would then fit within experiencing something exciting. So the theme isn't, I have a problem that needs to be fixed, as with Someone Fix My Humdrum Life, but experiencing something exciting. And so that's sort of the two sort of categories that are the main categories that I ended up with. So that's sort of what we have here. We have romance with two sort of sub-genres, sub-understandings. So what is the wish fulfillment? Then we have love stories. We have books that weren't romance, shouldn't have been here really at all, just because they have a romance subplot, and some books that I ended up being unsure of. And then you probably see this last one here, with the subgenre of romance with just id versus ego, I'm special. What separates I'm special from the two others is that the two books I've placed in this one are both male-oriented compared to the more female-oriented of Someone Fixes My Humdrum Life, or the more mixed-oriented, so both male and female-oriented, with experience something exciting. So with the I'm Special, you, among other things, get the book Victoria by Knut Hamsun. Now, some people might say that this doesn't actually fit into a romance category at all, because this doesn't have what we would say is a happy ending. But the important thing to remember is that when this came out in 1898, this ending was considered a happy ending, weirdly enough. So this is about a poor man who falls in love with a rich girl, the daughter of a very, very rich man, and they fall in love, but they can't be with one another because he is poor and she is rich. And therefore, the happy ending is she dying rather than being with someone else. That is what was considered a happy ending at the time, even if we today wouldn't consider this a happy ending. But you can't really read books focusing on what are they trying to communicate without taking some consideration into the fact that communication has changed over time. So with the id versus ego, I'm special, what you have are romance books that are male-oriented. They are male main characters. That's not necessarily something very different from the others, but they don't really have a problem at the start. They don't really want to experience something exciting. It's more that I'm special enough to have this person that should be out of my league get into my league. Or I'm special enough to fool the system that I get a partner that should be out of my league. So these are books that are very much written in a more hierarchical society where there isn't a lot of social mobility. And that's why you sort of get certain endings, because them being together is never the option, but they're still so in love that death is better. So that is sort of the last category that we have. So here you can sort of see how I ended up plotting books within these different codes and categories. So the Hating Game, When Dimple Met Rishi, and The Witch of Willow Hall all are examples of my humdrum life. It Happened One Summer, Outlander, and An Extraordinary Union by Alyssa Cole are about experiencing something exciting. I'm Special only had two books, Victoria by Knut Thompson and Two Fair Cousins by Zhang Yun. Then you have Love Stories with Jamie Ford, and also The Yellow Rose by Yoshia Nbuku. This is an example of Class S culture. It's a lesbian story, and lesbian stories have historically had sad endings because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to be published. It's my theory. There are a lot of different theories about it, but I placed it in the love story, not necessarily because the couple itself, but how I have interpreted the communication of the story, which is trying to put forth how wonderful it is to be in love with a girl when you are a girl. And here you sort of see some of the examples of books that I thought would be romances, partly because when I Googled it, they were romances. And when I tried to read it, I figured out the romance isn't really the main plot. And I've also have one book that I have put in the unsure code that I still can't really place. And the reason for that is that Emmy and Leo by Daniel Glattauer is actually two books in one. And I read both, and it's very different where that book would end if you are only reading the first book or the first part of a duology. Because the first, the book is about two people who start sending emails to one another and fall in love through these emails. But she is married to someone else. And the first book ends with them deciding that they need to stop sending each other emails. She needs to go back to her husband, focus on that, and this is the end of it. And that would have clearly put it in the love story. It's about the heartbreak of falling in love with someone when the timing is wrong. But book 2, that sort of picks up right afterwards, they start sending emails back again. And it's kind of contrived at the beginning, but when it gets going, it's just like reading more of it. And she ends up divorcing her husband and finding the man that she has sending these emails to. And that would clearly put it in fixing my humdrum life romance category. You see my dilemma? So this is where I have placed all of my books. And some of them are very clearly in it. For example, Jeremiah's Daughter by Samantha Price. I'm a tourist in the Amish culture, experiencing the Amish culture. Naked in Death by J.D. Robb. I'm experiencing being a homicide detective. And then you have certain books that I was, again, unsure of. Can't Resist It by Kieran Alexander, which was my queer example and is another of the sapphic books that I have read. And my problem with that book, the reason why I was struggling with figuring out, well, where does this actually fit in, is because from a writing perspective, from these are the tools of the trade, this is writing as a craft, it's not a well-written book. Sadly. Because there are so few sapphic books, especially with a classical happy ending. So you want the books to be good, and this isn't. It's partly based like a very traditional Hallmark film. You have 2 women who are traveling back to their home county and hometown, and one is there to demolish one of the community buildings to build something as part of a larger conglomerate. And one of the people is outraged by the fact that they are leveling this part of the small town and is doing everything in her power to fix it and stop it. And the problem I had with this book is that while the outer motivations of these 2 characters are very clear, I want to build a building, I don't want you to tear down part of this history, the inner motivation is not presented in a very clear way. Why do you want to build something here? Why do you want to preserve something? Why is this important? What are the arguments pro or against? What is driving you? None of that is very clearly defined, which makes it difficult to figure out which code to put it in. Because, okay, it is a wish fulfillment, but where are we? So I put it in the experiencing something exciting and the whole rural tourism, experiencing something that is different from what I'm used to, romanticizing aspects of it, but I'm not really sure if that is where it should be. So, Destination Wedding by Diksha Basu. I just have to ask, did anyone else think that the love story there was weak from the main character, that the main character wasn't really important in her own story, that all of the other sub-characters were much more interesting and were given much more importance in the story, or was that just me? The category of fixing my humdrum life was the category that got most books. So out of the 50 books I read, 10 were experiencing something exciting. 11 was, this isn't really a romance, but almost half of them fit into the category of fixing my humdrum life. So if you are disagreeing with any of these books and categories, please let me know. I am open for that my interpretation of these books, that people are disagreeing with how I placed it. And that's, of course, the importance of being able to talk about what we are reading. So this is sort of my thinking, my sort of summing up of everything that is going on and trying to then understand it. So I want to talk a little bit about, or just present the 10 books I enjoyed the most in this project before summing up my last thoughts. So, in no specific order, Catherine by Anya Seton. This is a love story between a very high nobleman and kind of, I think she's a lady at some sort of a very low level lady. And so they meet and they fall in love. And it's during sort of the 1100s, 1200s. And it's a very well-written book, talking a lot about her relationships with everyone around her and how she is trying to navigate this space, sort of being his mistress and being the mother to his children at the same time that he is married to someone else that he doesn't love because that's just someone that he married because of political affiliations, and her relationship to the church and how they look upon someone who is someone's mistress. And it's inspired by real people, and I understand why Anna Seton became so well known for this book. It's high level feminist romance, and being actually put into the history of the High Middle Ages. I haven't actually read that many historical romances that is a part of this time in history. So that was fun. It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. Just a funny romp. Nothing more, nothing less. Doesn't need to be. Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet by Jamie Ford. Again, this is a love story more than a romance, but I really enjoyed the reflections that the main character made, being Chinese American, about being Chinese American and his relationship with other Americans at a time when Japanese Americans were being persecuted by the American state because the US was at war with Japan. An Extraordinary Union by Alyssa Cole. This book is set in revolutionary times in the South, and it's about a woman who is dark-skinned and a man who is white, who work for this organization that is trying to free as many slaves as they can. And of course, him being a white man in the South, he wields a lot of social power that the organization uses to free as many slaves. But she, being a dark-skinned woman in the South during slavery time, is more hesitant in, can we really trust him issue. Brilliantly written. And I was surprised that she also wrote, because she wrote another book that I read. And I was surprised about it because it was so different books. The Yellow Rose by Yoshia Mbuku. This is, of course, the lesbian book. It's so poignant, and it's so both sad in the sense that what happens to a person when you aren't allowed to grow into the person you want to grow into, when society puts these limitations on you. But at the same time, the sort of acceptance that young children and sort of young adults can get when they're sort of living in a bubble and being able to explore their own identity before sort of having to be a grown-up. The Legend of the Ice People by Margit Sandemo. This is a Norwegian book and one of the first sort of what we would call kioskroman. And it's about sort of the exploration of sexuality in regarding to the church. And are you allowed to be sexually active? Are you allowed to be sexually attracted to someone and still be sort of considered a good moral person? Bitter Spirits by Jen Bennett. This is about a man who is persecuted by someone who uses there's a pun here on bitter spirits because he is a bootlegger and someone is using ghosts to try and make his life miserable, and she is a medium who can talk to ghosts. So bitter spirits is then the pun on both the fact that he is a bootlegger and the ghosts. And yes, that's the level of fun where we are dealing with. So very similar to It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. Sin is a puppy that follows you home. I have it here. By Balaraba Yamayat Yukabu. Probably not how you're pronouncing it. I'm very sorry. This is actually a type of romance that they call love literature. It's called also something else, but I'm not going to be able to pronounce that. And it's an experience. She is a part of, I think you pronounce it Hausa, which is an ethnic group in Nigeria. So women of Hausa came together and started writing romance books. And that was actually one of the main reasons why Hausa women ended up becoming literate, because they got so excited trying to read all of this love literature. What I really enjoyed about this book is mostly the cultural differences. This is a book written in Nigeria, mostly in Islamic culture. You are dealing with polygamy. You are dealing with black magic, and about then a woman who falls in love with a man who wants to have her as his third wife, and everything else around it. So I really enjoyed just reading something that is so different in the way that I am used to reading stories, especially regarding, and I'm not going to go into details here, but especially regarding how do we fix mistakes, which is very different from in this book than I'm used to. And I'm not going to go into more details of that right now because this video is long enough. Number 9, Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I've read it before. This was a reread, and it's so cute. Catherine is such a delight, and the older I get, the more delightful she becomes, because the more I see myself in Catherine. And the more I'm able to laugh at myself because, yeah, we were all idiots when we are 17. I'm sorry to all 16 and 17-year-olds, but you're idiots because we all are. And number 10, Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. And this is a book about a couple that loses a child and gets a divorce and then finds each other again after that. So it's a very sweet book about finding back to each other as a couple, even if you've experienced trauma together. So those were the 10 books that I enjoyed the most in this reading experience. And to sum up, I wanted to figure out what are romance books, and are there any romance books that I really enjoy or could enjoy? And I've realized that no, romance probably isn't my genre. It's not the genre I'm going to enjoy the most, but at least now I can explain why. I can explain that the whole concept of wish fulfillment that a lot of people enjoy and need and is used in both male and female-oriented culture isn't something I'm really drawn to, isn't something that I really need in my culture, in my sort of cultural intake. And that's fine. That's just how we are different. That doesn't mean that there aren't romance books that I can enjoy. But if I'm going to read romance books, I'm probably going to orientate myself more towards experiencing something exciting rather than try and fix my humdrum life. And lastly, I also want to say that I think that we should be honest about romance genre as a literary genre, which is a craft in and of itself. In some way, romance genre has sort of had it easy by being treated as, well, the entire genre is trash. Because that means that there has not been any need to go in and talk about, well, what is good romance and what is bad romance, and what makes a romance good and what makes a romance bad regarding the objective craft of romance. And I'm saying that as something different than my enjoyment of something. I can recognize something as that is good craftsmanship, but it isn't really appealing to me personally. Or I enjoy this. I know it's bad, but I still enjoy it. So my enjoyment of something different than objectively talking about objective craftsmanship. And I think that having done this project, what I can say is that we should be more honest that one thing is that you have romance as a genre that just is. It's not better or worse necessarily than a lot of the other genres. So it as a genre shouldn't get as much flack as it is getting. But on the other hand, we should then be able to talk about what makes a romance good and what makes a romance bad as sort of the craft of writing a romance. So that's my long video on this and my final take. What do you think? And you are happy to be able to disagree with me. Just let me know in the comments down below and let's talk about it. And for you romance girls, thank you for letting me visit your country, in lack of a better term. It has been a fun time, most of the time. And thank you for listening to me screaming into the